All right, everybody. Hey, welcome back. Second video. Look at that. Today we are going to be talking about solving and diagramming friction, especially friction vectors and components. By the way, I decided to put on my best Kermit the Frog shirt today, and then my hair looks how it looks. Such is life. I'm going to keep messing with it, but I don't think there's any fixing it at this point, so this is what you have to deal with. So we are going to be solving and diagramming friction. Not only are we solving and diagramming friction, which would be like with our free body diagrams, which we did earlier in the year, which looks something to this effect, but we are actually going to be solving and diagramming friction on a inclined plane. So that is going to give us a scenario that looks like this, and then we're going to have a box. And the things that we are going to have to solve for is we are going to have to solve for gravity, our parallel and perpendicular applied forces, normal, and then we will be given our static force there. So we're going to do this multiple times, so don't let this overwhelm you right here. There is a little bit of math we're going to need to know for this, and that is going to be our sine, cosine, tangent. Specifically, the equation we are going to be using is cosine of theta is times our force of gravity. It can also be written as cosine of theta times mass times acceleration, or it can be written as cosine of theta times mass times gravity. Three different ways. Really, they're the same because if we look, force is just mass times acceleration. So right there, we either have the force of gravity, which is right here. We have mass times acceleration, which is right here. And then gravity is just an acceleration unit, is all it is. It's meters per second squared. So these are all really saying the same thing. So we are going to use cosine of theta times the force of gravity. And this is going to get us our force value that is perpendicular to the body. It's going into the inclined plane. And then we have to also find the value that is parallel. 1 second, let me see if I even spelled that right. Probably not. All right, looks like Mr. Owens does not know how to spell parallel off the top of his head. He put too many R's in here. All right, so we have perpendicular, P-A-R-A-L-L-E-L. All right, so we have perpendicular, and then parallel is going to be same structure. Instead of cosine, it's going to be sine of theta times the force of gravity. And then it's the same situation. It's the sine of theta times mass times acceleration, or it's the sine of theta times mass times gravity. All the same scenario, they all mean the same thing. It's just, how do you like to look at it? Reminder that when we are looking at our units and stuff, if we see something that is just a capital F, that is going to be a force. And then the subscript is going to tell us what it is. So force of capital F is force, lowercase f is friction. So that's the force of friction. Capital F and a N is going to be our normal force. We got the force of gravity. And then we also have static friction. So lowercase f is going to be friction. And then the subscript s is going to be static, which is what we're going to be working with today. And then we also have F of A or F applied. Either way, this right here, these two mean the same thing. This is an applied force. So those are all the ones we are going to be working with today. So let's get started. A 10 kilogram box is resting on a 30-degree inclined plane. The static friction force preventing it from sliding is 15 newtons. Oh, let me slide that a little bit. There we go. All right. So if you know me, you know I'm going to draw this out first. All right. I'm going to draw my box. And we are going to find the force of gravity. We are going to find, well, we're actually given the static friction, but I'm going to label it And then we are going to find the normal force. And then we're also going to find our force applied. We're going to do, how should we denote this? We're going to do 2 lines for parallel. Oh, that looks like I'm just writing fall. There's probably a better way to do this, but force applied parallel. There we go. Look at that. We have force applied parallel and force applied perpendicular. Best way for me to dictate it right now. All right. This is just that way it doesn't clog up our left side of the screen here. So our force of gravity, we are going to use mass times acceleration, and we know our mass is 15 kilograms, and our acceleration is negative 9.8, because that is the acceleration of gravity. So 15 times negative 9.8, that is going to get us negative 147. So negative 147, and that is newtons. So that is our force of gravity pulling us straight down. So force, gravity, that's going to be negative 147 newtons. Now we are going to have to find the, let me move this a little bit. I said I wasn't going to do it, and then I proceeded to do it. There we go. There we go. All right, so that's our force of gravity. Force of gravity is negative 147 newtons. Now, we have to find our component forces here. The force that is going perpendicular into the body and the force that is going parallel down the ramp. So for the perpendicular force, we are going to use cosine. So that is going to be cosine of theta, and theta for us is going to be 30 degrees. And, and then I'm going to label static friction because it's already given to us. All right, so our static friction is equal to 15 newtons. So we already have our static friction, 15 newtons. We have to find our perpendicular applied force, our parallel applied force, and then our normal force. So back to cosine. Sorry, a little scrambled here. So cosine of theta, that is going to be 30 degrees. And we are going to multiply that by that negative 147. Cosine of 30 times negative 147. And that's going to give us a value of little mark popped up and disappeared. Negative 127.31. It's 305. We're going to round up to 31. So negative 127.31 newtons, and that is going into the body. So we're going to do force applied, perpendicular, and that is equal to negative 127.31 newtons. So the thing about normal force, which we did earlier with our free body diagrams, is that the normal force is going to be equal to and opposite of the force going normally for us would be going down, the force of gravity, because we are on a flat surface, but it is the force going perpendicular to the plane you are on. So negative 127.31 newtons is our force going into the body. So that means that our normal force is going to be equal and opposite. So force normal is equal to positive 127.31 newtons. Let me make that positive 15. It's equal and opposite. If it wasn't, then that means that you are falling through the floor. So we don't want that. We now know our normal force because that's just equal and opposite. So it's positive 127.31 newtons. Now we need to find our force applied that is parallel to the body. So we are going to do a sine of theta, which is still 30, times the force of gravity, which is still negative 147. And that is going to give us negative 73.5 newtons. Negative 73.5 newtons is our force applied parallel. All right, so we now know something from looking at this diagram. By looking at this diagram that we have all of our answers here, but on this diagram, we know that with our 15 kilogram mass, it being pulled down onto this 30-degree inclined plane, that it has a downward force, the gravitational force of negative 147 newtons. Because it's on the inclined plane, we have to split that vector across its components, its parallel and its perpendicular components. The perpendicular one is just to get us the normal force that is in the situation. The parallel force is important because what that does is it tells us if this object is going to slide down the inclined plane. Now, looking at what we have here, there's 15 newtons of force holding the acting upwards, essentially as a resistance for our object on the inclined plane, and going downwards with our object is negative 73.5 newtons. Now, when we are looking at these values, we want to look at the absolute values, because if I say that the force applied in the parallel direction is greater than the static force, static frictional force, some people will be like, but Mr. Owens, positive 15 is greater than negative 73.5. Well, absolutely, you're correct. But in this situation, we're talking about really the absolute forces, absolute value that's happening here. So because 73.5 is larger than 15, that is going to tell us that there is going to be an extra 73.5, extra 58.5 newtons of force pulling this object down the ramp that is not being supported by the static frictional force. So this object will slide down the ramp. Excuse me. So this object will slide down the ramp. Now I know that wasn't an explicit question stated in this, but it's kind of what we're trying to answer. So will this object slide down the ramp? This object will slide down the ramp. Not much. 1 second. All right. Had a special guest appearance by Mr. Sheets. Got to chat with him for a minute. All right. So the object will slide down the ramp. So we now know that looking at this. So we have a second situation here. Let's look at this and try and see what we can do. So I did the first one. Let's work on the second one together. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to draw this inclined plane. And then we have a box on the inclined plane. A 15 kilogram object is placed on a 45-degree ramp. Static friction preventing it from moving is 25 newtons. So same deal. Draw out our force vectors. So we have the force of gravity. We have the perpendicular applied force. We have the parallel applied force. We got the normal force. And we got the static frictional force. So friction static is going to be 25 newtons. And then we have the force of gravity we have to find. And then we have the force applied parallel. And then we have the force applied, English is a rough language, let me tell you. Force applied perpendicular, there we go. And then force applied parallel. So we are going to find those, same way we found them last time. The friction, and then normal force. What are you doing, Mr. Owens? Normal force. There we go. All right. So we have the static force already given to us, and then we need the force applied perpendicular, and then the force applied parallel. the force of gravity, and then the normal force. So 25 newtons. Force of gravity should be 15 times that negative 9.8 again. And I know we already wrote on the previous one, but I'm going to double check my number, and it is still negative 147. So 15 kilograms times negative 9.8. That is going to equal negative 147 newtons. All right, now we have to find, oh, what are you doing, you dingus? This is the part of the show where Mr. Owens writes something in the wrong spot. There we go. All right, so we have found the force of gravity. Now we need to find our applied force parallel and perpendicular. So with the applied force perpendicular is going to be cosine of 45 times negative 147 newtons. And then our applied force parallel is going to be sine of 45 times negative 147 newtons. And that is going to give us cosine of 45 times negative 147. And I get negative 103.94. 103.94 newtons. And then for parallel, I get negative 103.94 newtons. That's a terrible one. Made it worse. All right, so we have negative 103.94. And then force applied parallel equals negative 103.94 newtons. So we know what our normal force is going to be because it's going to be equal and opposite to our applied force. So it's going to be that 103.94 newtons. And there we go. Easy money right there. So we have, positive 103.94. I know I didn't write negative, but just like to dictate that. So looking at this, we see that our frictional or our applied force parallel to the body, parallel to the plane we're on, is negative 103.94, as opposed to the frictional force, the static frictional force of 25 newtons positive. We know that the object will slide down the ramp. All right, this next one, these next three actually, I am going to pull it up. I'm going to pause it. I'm going to turn off the camera so that way you can pause it and you don't have to look at me. And then once you are done, you can resume the video, and then I should have the math all worked out for you, and then make sure that we have the same answers. So just scroll down. Here's your next one. A 20 kilogram crate is on a 25-degree incline. The static friction force acting against its motion is 10 newtons. I'm going to start you off with, first off, doing the wrong thing. Drawing our force triangle, or our triangle with that we are having our box slide down. I'm going to let you do it from here. I'm going to switch so that way you don't have to look at me. And best of luck. Pause the video now and do your work. All right. So I hope everything's going all right now. My computer overheated and then stopped, locked me out, locked me in, and then I froze, and so I had to stop recording, start a new recording, so I'm going to splice these together. So, fun stuff. This should be the answer you get. We have a gravitational force of negative 196 newtons, which means that our perpendicular force is going to be negative 177 newtons, 177.64 newtons. Our parallel force is going to be negative 82.83 newtons, and our normal force is going to be equal and opposite to our perpendicular force, so it's going to be positive 177.64 newtons. And our frictional force that is static is only 10 newtons, which tells us that this is going to overall slide down. Slide down. I have to try writing it a different way now. I got my tablet popped up, so might be a little funky from now on with the videos. So same deal here. We have a 50 kilogram object that's placed on a 40-degree inclined plane. The static frictional force is 60 newtons. So here we have our triangle, and I'm going to leave that with you with a box on the plane. And now I'm going to switch so you don't have to look at me, and then you can do the calculations. And I will be back momentarily. Alrighty, and we're back. Here is the whole diagram. Once again drawn out, our gravitational force that we got should be negative 490 newtons, with our our perpendicular force being negative 375.36 newtons. Our parallel force being negative 314.97 newtons, which gives us a normal force of positive 400 and... Oh, it's not positive 490. Mr. Owens made a mistake. He's on autopilot. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. That should be positive 375.36. Ain't nothing wrong with making mistakes, so long as you can identify them. So our normal force, remember, is equal and opposite to our perpendicular force. I guess I should be talking to myself there. Which gives us positive 375.36. Our parallel force is that negative 314.97, which is very significantly larger than our static friction force of 60 newtons. So this object will slide down the ramp. All right, and I think we only have one more. Yep, just one more. All right. So a 5 kilogram block is placed on a 5-degree incline with a static friction of 8 newtons. You know what I'm gonna say? Let's draw this out. I just love drawing. All right. We're trying to find all these points. So, do the same thing. I'm going to fade out from existence. And now, you may pause the video and try the problem yourself. And I'm back. All right, so here we have our diagram again. A 5 kilogram block is placed on a 5-degree incline with a static friction of 8 newtons. So we have our diagram here with our applied parallel force going down and our static friction opposed, and then our force applied perpendicular, as well as our normal force being the opposed force, and then gravity being the lone vector. So our force of gravity for 5 kilograms times negative 9.8 meters per second is going to be 49 newtons, or negative 49 newtons. Because this is 5 degrees is like really not much, our perpendicular force is going to be pretty close to 49. Negative 49, so it's negative 48.81, which gives our normal force a value of positive. You just can't win, can you? Positive 48.81. Our parallel force is going to be negative 4.27 newtons, which, for the first time ever, is less than our static force. So this object will remain still. Look at that. All right. Well, I hope this helped for helping with friction diagrams and calculating friction, things like that. If you have any other questions or need other assistance, please, as always, let me know. That's what I'm here for. More videos soon to come. So have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video.